What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Leo, and on this channel here we're all about simplifying your finances, improving your investments, and just crushing the game, all things money related. In this video here we're going to be talking about creating a passive income with dividend stocks. So without further ado, let's get to it. So when it comes to creating a passive income through dividends, the most important thing is having a strategy. But before we can actually establish that, it's understanding what a dividend actually is. A lot of you probably know what dividends actually are, but for those who don't know what dividends are, essentially it's a distribution of profits that companies will give out to shareholders. So there's two types of stocks. There's growth stocks and dividend paying stocks. The growth stocks essentially will take any kind of earnings that they get and reinvest them back into the company. Whereas our dividend stocks, like I said earlier, will take some of those earnings and allocate them over to the shareholders. So you're pretty much just getting paid a certain percentage just for holding the stock and, kind of sticking around. It's kind of like, here's a medal, man. Thanks for hanging out with us. Here's your payment. Kind of cool. An example of a very popular dividend paying stock would be Coca-Cola. Warren Buffett talks about Coca-Cola all the time, and for very good reason. So ticker symbol is KO if you want to just search it up on your computer or whatnot, or your phone. But essentially, from holding Coca-Cola for whatever it's worth, you get paid out $1.64 each year for just holding one share. It has a 3%, around 3% dividend. So from just holding the share, doesn't matter if the price moves up, price moves down, you'll be getting $1.64, and that price keeps on rising every year because they're one of the, dividend kings or aristocrats, one of the two, and because they've consistently been paying the dividends for over 50 years and constantly raising that dividend for the last 50 years. So just for holding that stock, you're just getting money, essentially. So how do we go about turning that into a passive income? Well, there's a lot of things we have to cover, and that is through an analyzation of the dividend stocks that we choose. And our three main categories are payment history, payment ratio, and then finally our dividend yield. So let's start off by talking about payment history. I believe payment history is the most important question of our whole dividend stock analysis, and I'm going to tell you why. There's two questions that we need to ask ourselves when we're assessing a dividend stock. How long has the company been paying its dividends out for? And two, how long have they been consecutively increasing those dividends? Let's say you're a landlord and you're trying to find someone to, rent your house or whatever property that you own. And you find someone with a track record and they've consistently always have paying their rent on time, and if the landlord before you has upped their rent, they consistently pay that on time as well. That would look pretty good. Same principle applies to the stocks that we're trying to find. So when it comes to companies consistently paying out their dividend over, let's say, a period of years, the longer the better. Ideally, 20 years is something that I look forward to. Probably 15 to 20 to be more specific is a safe bet, but anything longer than that, and that's a really good sign. The reason I say between 15 and 20 years is pretty good is because usually during that time, a company will go through some sort of economic hardship. Take the present day, for example. At the point of recording this video, we're in the middle of a pandemic. 10 years ago, we went through an economic crash. And 20 years ago in the early 2000s, we had another crash with the dot-com bubble. In those 20 years, if a company has consistently been paying out their dividends from that point onwards, that's a pretty solid company. They haven't wavered through any kind of economic crisis. Bringing back Coca-Cola for an example, they have been consistently paying out their dividends since 1963. That's 57 years of consistently paying a dividend, as well as, not to forget, they've also been increasing that dividend every single year. That's why they're such a popular stock, and that is why Warren Buffett absolutely loves them. these are the type of companies that we're after. So once we found a company that has a reputable payout history, we can now start focusing on the payout ratio. Now essentially what a payout ratio is how much of those earnings are being distributed as dividend payments. When it comes to payout ratios, I'm just going to flat out say 70% is the maximum number I would personally go to when it comes down to the numbers. Now 70% of that total earnings being allocated to dividend payments leaves only 30% to the company. Now those numbers are kind of shaky because if by chance the company runs up into some sort of like rocky road or whatnot, you could risk getting that payment cut or best case scenario reduced. For more information of why a company might cut their dividend or at least reduce it, you should definitely check out the video in the top right hand corner right over here. In that video I outlined 6 different possibilities and different reasons of what affects the company's stock price, which evidently will affect the dividend if it gets a little bit too rough. As far as payout ratios go, there's 4 ranges I like to go over. The first one being 0 to 35%. Now, at the low end, being 0%, you're not even a dividend stock, you're just a growth stock because you're not investing any of those earnings into your shareholders and paying them out as dividend payments. But if you go into the more higher side of that spectrum, on the 35%, that's pretty good. Usually companies that pay a 35% payout ratio are companies that are just recently starting to get into dividend payments and probably just hit that point and they've probably briefly just stopped growing. They're what they like to call dividend babies. They're not aristocrats, they're not kings, but little baby stocks that are just starting to put those payments together. Moving up, we have 35% to 55%. Now that's what I like to call a healthy range of payout ratios because there's still a lot of wiggle room for, let's say, growth earnings to happen where we can reinvest into the company. However, that payout ratio is also decent for our dividend investors. If it's split 50-50, that's pretty good. Now we also have that safety net for growth, but we also have the 50% allocated towards us dividend investors, which is great to see. Climbing up, now we're at the 55% range to 75% range. Now, remember what I was saying earlier, 70% is as high as I would go? I still stand by that. Now, when you're up in this range here, you're more a little bit of a higher risk because now majority of your earnings are now dividend payments and they're not towards growth. Not saying that's a completely bad thing, but now you run more of that little bit of a riskier line because let's say that rocky road happens, right? You don't have as much earnings towards the company to safely, safety net yourself, unless you're like a god of balance sheets. But that's just something to consider. Moving on, now we're in the big leagues with the 75% and onwards. My personal opinion, stay away from companies that are in that range. It is just too high risk for no reward. Companies that usually pay out 75% and onwards in their earnings as dividend payments are highly unsustainable. That's my opinion, but it also makes a lot of sense. You're allocating almost 80% of your total revenue towards shareholders and you only have 20% to allocate to this company. How is that going to work in an economic recession? How? I don't know. The only reason I would consider a stock within the 75 to 80% range is if that company's balance sheet is immaculate and are able to make that work and have a reserve of cash in case something terrible happens. It's the only reason why I would potentially invest into a company like that. Because when you're running a company like that, that is an extreme risk and it's something that you should definitely know. Side note, if you enjoyed the video up till this far, oh my god, can I speak? If you enjoyed the video up until this point, I appreciate you, 1, but 2, please leave a like and smash the subscribe button. Apart from doing these videos on YouTube, I'm also active on Twitch where I stream usually Thursdays and for sure I stream on Sundays. Join me here, the links will be down below, and yeah, hope to see you in the stream, hope to chat with you. I will start integrating a lot more investment talks into my streams and stuff like that, but hope to see you there. We can definitely play some video games if you do all that, but yeah, leave a like, hit the subscribe, it helps me out a lot, and I appreciate you. Now back to it. Let's move on. Now let's talk about dividend yield. So by this point, you should have a bunch of stocks, if you follow my research correctly, where you've looked at their payment history, dividend increases over the course of the years, as well as their payment ratio. That should lead you to a bunch of stocks that you've now found that, you know what, they're pretty decent picks in your eyes. Now we're going to talk about dividend yield. And the reason why I leave this last is because a lot of people put this first and then end up backtracking to try to justify what that yield is. Now, I put that last because, you know what, if a company can't afford to pay me over a certain amount of time, which I'm looking for because I'm looking to hold this long term, why would I invest in that company? Right? So having that backtrack of 20 years or 50 years of history shows me that, okay, this business is very competent at putting the shareholders in the primary spot, in the front seat, and paying us out first. So tying this into our dividend yields, it's important to recognize that dividend yields in the big scope of things don't play as much of a role compared to our payment history and payment ratio, right? Those are the deciding factors that we can look to determine what the outcome might be in the future. Now, where the dividend yield plays into effect is comparing those stocks that we've now collected amongst each other. What is going to be the best bang for our buck? And if you imagine yourself as a landlord, who is the best renter? Now, if I had to just guesstimate, a safe zone for yields that I have seen personally is within the 3 to 5% range. That's where Coca-Cola lies, 5%. That's where you can get like the IBMs. These are like all decent stocks that I personally enjoy and I personally have in my portfolio. That's why I'm kind of using them as examples. However, when you start approaching the 10% range, you do run into, you know, a lot more riskier investments per se. But the research that you do on the history and the research you do on the payment ratio, those are your safety nets that can help you push through those different riskier factions. So now, at this point, you should have a stock for sure that has a great history, a great payout ratio, and a pretty good yield. That's now going to be giving you this passive income every quarter and giving you a certain amount every year. Now, going forward, what do we have to do? Well, essentially what we want to do is rinse and repeat this whole process for another stock and keep upping our position on those stock that you already own. Ideally, what you want to try to aim for is getting to a point where now you've lined up a bunch of stocks that pay you for every month. And from this point, it just keeps snowballing and snowballing. And once you find those great investments that you truly believe in, they'll eventually just start paying you to the point where now those dividends are now just purchasing more stock of the companies that you already own. And it's going to keep snowballing where you can now just buy more and more and more as that income just keeps going up and up and up. It takes a little bit of a legwork in the beginning, but once you find those great investments, keep going, and then sooner or later you'll have payments coming in every single month just off of dividends. Also, I would totally recommend checking out Andrei Jikh's channel, which I don't know, I'll probably link him in the description right over here or make him pop up over here. But he's a phenomenal YouTuber that partakes primarily in dividend investing. He's gotten to the point where his portfolio now pays him out every single month with dividends. I definitely recommend checking him out. His videos are thoroughly well made. If you want to learn more about this whole dividend and passive income stuff, check him out. He is great. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the video. I wish you the best of luck on all your investments. And if you start to partake in getting a passive income going with dividend stocks, phenomenal. They're a lot of fun. And honestly, it's one of my favorite forms of investing personally. And like I said earlier, check out Andrei Jikh's channel. He is great. And I have no idea if I'm saying his last name properly or not, so I apologize, Andrei. Hopefully you can forgive me about that. But check him out. And good luck on all the investments. Leave a comment below of your favorite dividend stock and why it's your favorite. I'd love to hear it. Maybe I'll check it out. Maybe I'll add it to my portfolio. Who knows? But yeah, let's build a community. Let's have fun. Good luck in investing. Let's crush the game. Take it easy.